Hello everyone, welcome. I want to do what I always do, turn the microphone on and start talking. And hopefully something good will come out. As I said on my radio program the other day, we live in troubled times, but times have always been troubled. And as a matter of fact, each of us, Napoleon faced his Waterloo. Each of us has only so much time to discover the purpose for our existence. Why are you here? There has to be a reason for your existence. And it has to be beyond eating and drinking and texting and playing video games. But you have a limited amount of time to discover why you are here. And so you either discover it or you don't. And if you don't, then you face an eventual Waterloo. So now would be just as good a time as any to begin searching for your existence. Now, how do you do that? Well, I can give you some hints. First of all, it has to be sincere. And secondly, it's an individual thing. Other people can't help you do it. There are a few people who might point the way, but who are they and where are they? And the average person, or even the average nice person, so-called nice person, or the average person who can spout platitudes or Bible verses or something. That's about all they can do. And then maybe one of those verses that is said will awaken you to something. But now, here's the interesting thing. Let's say that somebody says something and it awakens you to realize something. Now, just what is it that awakens you to realize? There's something inside, isn't it? And when you do realize, it's also inside. So the only thing the outside thing does was it was like an alarm clock or a bell or something. And you awakened from your slumber. Now, it's about the most someone can do for you. It's say something that awakens you. Now, here's where the sincerity part comes in. Remember, I said it has to be a sincere search. If it's not sincere, it won't work. Here's where the sincere part comes in. The thing that first awakens us from our deep slumber is something that makes us aware that we're wrong. For example, the lady is yelling at her child, and the child starts to cry. Well, the child's tears can awaken that parent to realize that she's being mean and impatient and cruel to her child. You see what I mean? Another person can look at their family. Maybe they're drinking or taking drugs, or maybe they're working too much. They're never there for their family, for example. And they see their family is suffering. When they see their family suffering, it awakens them to realize that they're not getting things right. You have to see that a lot of things put you to sleep. Comforting words, people's supportiveness, escaping into things, into your food, into your drink, into your iPhone, even into sleep. For example, lately I've become aware that when I sleep, seems like I sleep too deeply. Seems like my sleep should be lighter so that I'm not lost in it and where it's hard to pull out of it. It should be a light sleep where I can wake up and I'm right there. It shouldn't be where I'm deeply into sleep and then I can hardly rouse myself. Do you understand it? You see the difference? Same thing with food. You ought to be able to eat a little bit and then go about your activities. But when food, you become totally absorbed into the food, it becomes too important. Or when after eating the food, you're all groggy and, see, too much. Even illness. There ought to be a way to be ill, but not totally lost in it. You ought to have a little be able to stand back and have a little mental distance so that you have your awakeness, your alertness, so you can realize. That's it. So you can realize. Do you see? Now, there's not much you can do about any of these things other than to just see that you're too lost in this or too deeply into that. People, sometimes they get deeply into that or deeply into gambling or deeply into some person and they sense that it's not good. Lucky they are if they can pull back. Now, when you pull back, when you stand back, when you see that you're too much into your friends, too much into your conversation, too much into gossip, too much into the news can put you to sleep. And there's no more, you know, who was it who's the Chinese philosopher that said, you know, what did he say? I can't remember now. But one thing is something about interesting times. There's something about living in interesting times, which is not good. You know what's not good about it? Because you get all caught up in what's happening and the news and talking about it and watching news. It can be a huge distraction. That's it. Interesting times. Deep sleep. Deeply into food. Deeply into friends. Conversation. Work. Anything deeply into it pulls you away from realizing, from searching for the meaning and purpose of life. Now, how do you search for the meaning and purpose of life? Well, you are a bit detached from all of these things. So don't get me wrong. You don't have to be a recluse. That doesn't help any. No, you have to be out in the world as a mom, a dad, a student, a worker. You do your job and there you are. But just not so deeply into things. And the way you'll know whether you're doing it right is if you're using the proper meditation so that you can start the day off with a little bit of mental distance. But you'll know that it's right if things that happen awaken you to realize. Awaken you to realize, to see, to understand. You see? Let me see if I can give you an example. I can't think of an example now. But that's how you see the meaning to life comes in little clues, little things that you see, little things that, there's a beautiful passage in the Bible where Jesus was doing things. He was healing the sick and talking to the people and everything that he did, and casting out demons, and he said that Mary watched. She stood silently by, and she watched, in the distance probably, she watched. And she kept all of these things in her heart. See, there's a way of going through life where you maintain yourself. You're not pulled into things. Where you snap out of being caught up in something and realize. And even realizing that you were caught up in something is a useful realization. When you realize that you're not. I'll give you a simple example, down to earth example. You're driving along, and all of a sudden you realize that you're lost in thought. You're daydreaming. Then you snap out and you're back in the present again. That's where you want to be when you're driving. You want to be in the present, alert, aware, thoughtful. You don't want to be lost in the daydream. You see? So you snapped out. So that was your protection. When you're walking down the street, you don't want to be lost in thinking. Somebody can sneak up on you, steal your iPhone from your pocket. You want to have an awareness. Not where you're hyper-vigilant and paranoid, but just an awareness. So I said that you have to search for the meaning of life. And the way you do that is to go about your business and notice little things and realize little things. And at certain times and places, then there will be an opportunity to do something that's not so good. And you just don't do it. And you see everybody else rushing to do something and you just don't. Because you're close enough to your intuition that you have that protection. You see? And what is that protection for? Well, it keeps you so that you have more time to realize. That brings up another interesting topic, and that is, why did God give us intuition? He didn't give it to animals. Animals have instinct. They don't have intuition where they can wordlessly see. Why? Why did he give that to us? Well, for a purpose, so that you can discover the purpose to life. And remember, the word is discover. Every day, a little bit. Every day you see a little more, you realize things, you stand back from what formerly would have pulled you into it, and you thereby, you're closer to the source of intuition that God gave you. Now, what happens to us is that we step away from intuition because we make something too important on the outside. And then emotions rise, and then we become for or against, and before long your mind is involved, and you try to analyze and figure out and scheme things. I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and one of these little commercials comes on. You know, the ones that you have to watch for 5 seconds or something, and then you can click the commercial off. And it was a guy who is, and I won't say his name, but he's a physicist. And you see him everywhere now. But he's, anyway, he was talking. And there was something about the energy that he put into it and the rapidity with which he spoke and so on. I could see that he was just totally empty and devoid of understanding. Totally empty of it. He was just like a chattering goose making noises. And so you don't want to be like that. But do you see that realization? So do I resent the person? No. Do I dislike him? No. But I'm not fooled by him either. And I don't waste my time. I don't waste my time. I click the commercial off. And I don't waste my time. You see? So that little realization is very important. You see what's true and also what's not true. And you eventually realize that it's the truth that's showing you. Now, that brings me to something, and I hope I can find it here. Yes, this is it. This is what I almost began to talk about today, and I end up talking about it. This is Madame Guyon, Chapter 18, Divine Dependence, in the book Experiencing God Through Prayer, a translation of her short and easy method of prayer. Madame Guyon says, I hope that you have understood my emphasis thus far of learning to rely on God for even the slightest spiritual activity. It certainly is not my intention to promote a lazy, dull existence. Our highest form of activity is to press on into a total dependence on the Spirit. For in Him we live and move and have our being, as it says in Acts. Total dependence on the Creator. So do you see that when you're watching something, here comes a YouTube commercial, or somebody says something, or anything, if you are to realize and to see and to know the truth about that, even that it's nothing, that it's not worth your time, whatever the truth may be, do you realize that you're totally dependent on your Creator? You want to be totally dependent on your Creator. So when I'm just using this commercial as an example, when the commercial comes on and you hear a little bit of it, you have an attitude of neutrality. You don't know whether it's good, not so good, true, not true, useful, not useful, a waste of time. See? And then you hear it lightly. It goes in one ear and out the other. Do you see? You listen lightly. And then you see. And if you don't see, that's okay. Then it just goes in one ear and out the other. But if there happens to be a nugget of truth, see, even a bad person, let's say there was a bad person that happened to say something true, well, when you hear that true thing, it might awaken you to realize something. See? So it becomes where you can, you can pick the brains of people. You can do a little bit of research here and there, and somehow you're able to glean little tidbits, a little tidbit here, a little bit there. Somehow it's collated, and you see. And then sometimes you're moved in a certain direction, and it turns out to be right. It's very hard to explain, but it's a total dependence on your Creator. You go out in the world, and there's somebody, and you just look at them. You don't have any feelings about them one way or the other. And if there's something to know, something to realize, then God will make you realize. He doesn't always make you realize right away, because it may not be useful. Because let's say you were walking along the street, and on the other side of the street there was a person walking who's a terrible robber. He's robbed dozens of houses. He's a terrible person. Well, if you realize that he's a terrible robber, then what are you going to then see? You feel like you have to do something. So it's better if you don't know. See? But on the other hand, if you're getting ready to have some business with that person, then all of a sudden you get a sense, wait a minute, and you back off. See? So it's on a need-to-know basis. See? It's beautiful. So if God will help you with these little things, then finding the purpose of existence is just continuing to live like that, because he will also put little clues about the important things. Who Jesus is, what salvation is. See? Things like that. Little clues, and you'll just see it. You won't even be able to tell other people about it. See? Little clues. And all those little clues are leading you somewhere. They're leading you, see, to him. What was that beautiful Bible verse that I was reading today? Something like, he said that it was Paul saying that we should be of one mind about this. And about this means that we press on toward the heavenly calling that was spoken by Christ, or that Christ leads us, that Christ is leading us in this heavenly calling. We press on, that he heard from Christ, and that we press on, and if we're not thinking quite right about it somehow, or we have a wrong idea somehow about something in connection with that, then God will make you aware of that too. See? So he guides you ever so gently in a meandering course that you could never figure out in a million years, in both little things and big things. And so to the extent that you get your ego out of the way, to the extent that you don't get lost in things, that you don't get too deeply into sleep, too deeply into food, too deeply into news, see, too deeply into study, even religious study. You don't want to get deeply in it. You stand back. And then to the extent that you do that and you realize your dependence upon God, that means you know that you have to stand back. You know that you have to watch and wait for some clue. And there it is, out of nowhere. It's a wonderful journey. It's a wonderful, wonderful journey. Just like when you were a little child and you discovered things. It's the same way. It's beautiful.